Hello everybody, and welcome back to Sponge Week. As you may know, today is Friday, the last day of Sponge Week, and today I decided to go over my bottom 5 episodes, and I will be making a video later today where I go over my top 5. Anyway, so let's get straight into my bottom 5 SpongeBob episodes. Now, before I start, I would just like to say, if you disagree with me, that's A-okay. Just please be polite about it if you beg to differ. So, let's jump right in with number 5. My bottom 5 SpongeBob episode would have to be Good Neighbors. This episode is a Squidward torture episode. Done so wrong. It's done way wrong. It's just not funny. It just makes you feel so much sympathy for Squidward. And it can definitely be excused if you have a valid excuse. Like, if Squidward is a jerk to SpongeBob and Patrick before he gets tortured by them. Or if, somehow, like in The Thing, Squidward is covered in cement so he can't tell SpongeBob and Patrick that he hates what they're doing to him and he just wants to go home and enjoy his time to himself. So, you need to have a valid excuse. If you just randomly torture Squidward after he yells in their faces for an excessive amount of times, and they still are their ignorant selves just bowing down to him, it just doesn't get right. Because what does Squidward do that's wrong in here? All he wants to do is have a relaxing Sunday. The one day of the week he doesn't have to just listen to idiots talk to him at a fast food restaurant that smells like grease and get paid like a penny a year. So, basically, well, I don't know if that's actually true that he gets Sundays off, because of course there is the fact that SpongeBob has no continuity, but that's besides the point. The point is, Squidward did nothing bad to SpongeBob and Patrick in this episode, yet they still torture him. If I had to say something positive about this episode, because it is my 5th least favorite, there's 3 things I like about this episode. Number 1, the opening shot with SpongeBob, Squidward, and Patrick all sleeping. I think that was just kind of cool. Another thing I like is when Squidward screams, "You don't deserve to wear those fezzes!" And then he stomps them on the ground. That was pretty funny. And the last part I like about this episode is where SpongeBob turns on the ceiling fan when they're trying to figure out how to deactivate the security system. I like ceiling fans, so yeah, don't judge me. Anyway, so that's just about all I have to say for Good Neighbors. Now it's time for number 4. My number 4 least favorite SpongeBob episode is Tunnel of Glove. As you know, this is a newer one. I think it might be from Season 9, possibly Season 8, but I'm not 100% sure. Now, this episode, it's just one of those examples of how Pearl went from such a sweet, delicate, nice, and innocent, just jazzy and cool teen girl to a nasty, bratty, back-sassified, I'm not even sure if that's a real word, but I don't really care, just so mean-spirited and nasty teen. It's crazy. It is freaking crazy, the levels that she goes through just to torture SpongeBob. There's 2 basic plots going on in this episode. SpongeBob and Pearl go on the Tunnel of Glove with each other after, Pearl's friends tease her about being SpongeBob's boyfriend or girlfriend. And the other plot is that Patrick lost SpongeBob and he thinks a circuit board in the Glove World power thing is SpongeBob because miraculously it does look quite a bit like SpongeBob, so I'll forgive Patrick for that one. And honestly, the stupidity that Patrick goes through in his side of the plot is actually really, really funny. Like, he, sits on levers and leans against buttons, and he goes to the bathroom in the Glove World plumbing system. It's really funny. So that part of the episode I really enjoy. If it weren't for the fact that Pearl was so nasty to SpongeBob throughout this entire episode, this episode would not be on my bottom 5 list at all costs. It wouldn't. The fact that Pearl goes through all this trouble just to torture SpongeBob, and the fact that SpongeBob scares her mentioning all these things, even bus drivers, they're scary. Because I have had experiences with mean bus drivers, so yes, they are scary. Anyway, so, as I was saying, so SpongeBob scares Pearl because he's a little afraid, and eventually the Mammoths, they turn evil. Like, Patrick probably does something, and what happens is they, like, go from, like, these Romeo and Juliet referencing guys, and then they go after them, and they, like, shoot arrows at them and just attack them. It's pretty downright crazy, and the ride ends up exploding. And Pearl does admit she had fun with SpongeBob, but then gets interrupted with her friends, and she just instantly backs out of it. Yeah. The Patrick part was really, really good. Honestly, I thought that this might be number 5, because it was pretty good apart from the fact that Pearl was being such a douchebag. But honestly, Pearl being a jerk is one of the worst possible things to happen to SpongeBob, in my opinion. Which is why that's one of the only reasons, at least, that this episode is even in my bottom 5 list. Okay, moving on. Okay, here is numero 3. My number 3 least favorite SpongeBob episode is The Great Snail Race. This episode displays such a putrid and horrible way of SpongeBob being such a jerk to Gary. It's so horrible. It's just insane beyond belief. It drives me so crazy to see SpongeBob being such a jerk to Gary. First of all, because it's out of his character, and second of all, because Gary doesn't even want to do this. It's not the first, well, maybe it has, following the order of SpongeBob episodes, but it's happened before. It happened in Grooming Gary when he, wants him to enter him in the pet show, or in that other episode that I don't quite remember. And it's even happened in vice versa, where Gary's trying to do something with SpongeBob, and SpongeBob's completely ignoring him, like in that pet episode. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty surprised that that pet episode didn't end up on my bottom 5, but it would probably be in the bottom 10, if you ask me. It would definitely be there. If I made a bottom 10, that was. Anyway, so it's just so annoying to see whether it's SpongeBob being a jerk or SpongeBob not listening at all. I mean, Gary's the smart, good... Gary's always on the good side, whether it's one way or the other. And SpongeBob, and the fact that Shelly never makes another appearance again, what is it, like the only reason Squidward even got Shelly in the first place was to win that freaking race and get the trophy with his name pronounced incorrectly? Was that the only reason? If it was, then that was just insane. And the fact that Squidward laughs out loud that Gary exploded like some sort of race car is just harsh. And that explosion, it's pretty gruesome as far as SpongeBob would go. It just really is. I mean, sure, of course, SpongeBob and Gary make up, but still, it just drives me crazy. Okay, moving on to number 2. My number 2 least favorite SpongeBob episode is Waiting. This episode, just like number 3, is SpongeBob being a jerk to everybody. He's a jerk to Patrick, he's a jerk to Gary, he's a jerk to Sandy, he misses his birthday party because of it, which was apparently only a 5-second montage of some sort that we didn't even get to see, all because he gets the stupid toy that ends up getting ruined and then fixed by Squidward. What SpongeBob does is he gets all the cereal, forces Gary to eat it. He sends in all these box tops, and waits for his prize. And he waits and waits and waits. And he's like, what if the mailman comes while I'm gone? You just leave it in your mailbox, dum-dum. Just because you're not there when the mailman comes doesn't mean he's not gonna give it to you. He might need your signature, but still, that just doesn't make sense. So maybe if he needs a signature it would, but still. Anyway, so this episode just comes off as SpongeBob being such a nuisance, and that ending, it just was so horrible to see Patrick break the toy, not really, and then them freak out about it. That freak out was so horrible, and anytime I would see that episode on, I would instantly change the channel because of how much I hated that freak out as a kid. It was just horrible for me to watch as a kid. It was just horrible. The freak out and SpongeBob being a jerk combined, those two things just made this episode what it is. One of my least favorite SpongeBob episodes, and a horrible episode. And now, it is time for my number one least favorite SpongeBob episode. My least favorite SpongeBob episode of all time. And if you're wondering how an episode could get worse than Waiting, in my opinion, then you'll see. This episode I hate so much. It is such a horrible display of how the characters have changed over the years. It's a display of Mr. Krabs being cheap. It's a display of how Pearl has turned into a backsassing jerkface. It's a display of how she hates SpongeBob now. It's a display of how... It's just a display of torture done wrong, only it's not on Squidward, thank God. This episode is The Slumber Party. This episode is my number one least favorite SpongeBob episode, and yes, that's already been established, but let's just move on. What happens, it starts out with Mr. Krabs being a lazy slob and Pearl yelling, "Unacceptable! My slumber party friends will be here in like 15 minutes, and you're just laying around being a lazy slob, you stupid moron!" And he's all like, "Pearl, what are you doing? Hey, look!" And then what happens is, he goes, "You made corn cruddles come out my nose," or corn kernels, or whatever. Anyway, so eventually what happens is Mr. Krabs makes all these rules that Pearl can't have at her slumber party, and honestly, it's really annoying. But like I said, Pearl is even more of a back-sassing brat than she is in Tunnel of Glove. It's just really, really horribly displayed. And the fact that Pearl drops a piano on SpongeBob's head and almost kills him with boiling oil just comes off as harsh and nasty. And the fact that Mr. Krabs is like forcing him to go through all this pain, and the fact that they turn him into a pizza and Mr. Krabs basically just steals all of his things, because remember when he says he's going through his stuff? Obviously, if he sees anything he likes, he's gonna take it. I mean, that's a no-brainer. Anyway, so it's the portion of Mr. Krabs being annoying, the portion of SpongeBob getting tortured, and the fact that Pearl is now a back-sassing jerk face. And it ends with Pearl coming out on top, and Mr. Krabs' house gets destroyed thanks to SpongeBob pretending to be a root beer monster. So even SpongeBob is a bit of a jerk in this episode. Everybody comes off as a jerk. Everybody comes off as a nuisance. The characters have changed so much. Everybody is so out of character, except for Mr. Krabs, but it's still overdoing it. He's not cheap in a hilarious, funny way, which is what they're probably trying to go for here. Like, what was this episode made for? This episode does not even deserve to be made. Who came up with this episode? Who came up with this episode? Whoever came up, because here's the thing, it's not funny. There aren't any good jokes that I can see, at least. There are no jokes, no references, no cameos, nothing that even made me smile the slightest bit. So the out of characters, the fact that it's not funny at all, the fact that SpongeBob almost died several times, the fact that Pearl came out on top in the end, makes this a really bad episode. Whew! And that is my bottom 5 SpongeBob episodes. See you later today for my top 5. Waluigi Man 8689, out.